Why does life happen so that we fall in love with those who don't love us? Why do we chase those who don't even want to look our way? Why can money buy everything except love? Why does a woman you're ready to have sex with at least 3 times a day jump into bed with a taxi driver who doesn't care who he makes love to? I'm Sam. I'm in my late 60s, living in New York City. On paper, I look like a man who won at life. I built a very successful business. For decades, money was never a problem. I lived in the kind of apartments most people only see in movies, drove the kind of cars that make kids point on the street, traveled when I wanted, dined where I wanted. But if you strip away the balance sheets and the photographs of parties and luxury trips, I'm just a tired old man with regrets. The biggest one? My first wife. She loved me before the money, before I was Sam the businessman. I cheated on her, and I'll never forgive myself for that. Every woman I married after her, and I've had 3 more wives, always had some sort of condition to their love. Status, lifestyle, social circles, or straight-up cash. None of it ever felt real again. Still, I kept searching. After 60, when most of my friends were slowing down, I got this idea in my head that I still had time for something new, something wild. That's when Jane appeared. She's half my age, a former model. She had a reputation, not the good kind. My friends warned me, Sam, she's not the kind of woman you settle with. She's fun for a night, not for life. But when you're lonely and you meet someone who makes you feel 20 years younger just by smiling at you, well, it's hard to walk away. Jane was electric. She laughed loudly, cursed too much, loved expensive champagne, and had this way of making me feel like I was the only man in the room. I told myself, this time it'll be different. This time, I'll make it work. I knew about her past. Everyone did. My best friend even shoved evidence in my face, a handful of grainy videos from her younger days. Things I didn't want to see, things I pretended didn't matter. People change, I told him. She's with me now. I can give her a life where she doesn't need to be that person anymore. And I believed it. But I noticed early red flags. The first months with Jane were a roller coaster. She was moody, unpredictable, and sharp-tongued. One moment she'd be wrapped around me, telling me I was her savior, the only man who truly understood her. The next, she'd be slamming doors because I didn't like the dress she picked out, or accusing me of treating her like a child if I asked where she was going. I tried to chalk it up to passion. I told myself it was better than the cold indifference of my previous marriages. At least she cared enough to fight, right? That's how I spun it in my head. But the fights kept coming. She had this way of twisting things, making me feel like I was the unreasonable one. If she spent too much money, it was because I made her feel insecure. If she disappeared for hours without answering her phone, it was because I was too controlling. The word gaslighting wasn't one I used much before, but I started to learn it. She started using car services, taxis, Ubers, whatever. At first, it was random. Then I noticed it was always the same guy picking her up. His name's Alex, she told me casually one night, like it was no big deal. He's just nice. Safer to ride with the same driver, you know. I didn't think much of it. Actually, at the time, I was relieved. I told myself, good. She's not wandering the city with strangers. At least there's consistency. But little things bothered me. She'd come home humming songs I knew she didn't like before. She'd mention restaurants I knew she didn't hear about from me. And she'd laugh about funny stories from Alex. Who the hell bonds with their taxi driver? One night, I was sitting in our living room, sipping whiskey, waiting for her. She was late. 2 hours late. When she finally walked in, her hair was messy, and she had that glow, not the glow you get from a night with your girlfriends, but the glow you get when you've been looked at, touched, wanted. I asked where she'd been. With Alex, she said flatly, like it was the most normal thing in the world. We just grabbed coffee after he dropped me off. Coffee. At midnight. With her driver. I wanted to press harder, but the moment I opened my mouth, she exploded. Accused me of being paranoid, controlling, jealous. Said if I didn't trust her, maybe she should just leave. Tears, shouting, the whole performance. I caved, like I always did. Apologized. Told her I was just tired, just worried. She let me hold her afterward, like she was forgiving me. But inside, something cracked. I've got one sister, Lisa. She's the only person in my family I still confide in. One afternoon, I unloaded the whole story on her, Jane, the driver, the midnight coffees. Lisa didn't mince words. Sam, she's playing you. You're setting yourself up to be humiliated again. I told her I loved Jane. That I couldn't just walk away. That maybe if I gave Jane stability, she'd change. Lisa sighed. Or maybe she'll drag you down with her. At the time, I brushed it off. But her words stuck in my head, circling back whenever I caught Jane texting in the bathroom or slipping out with some vague excuse. The rides with Alex became more frequent. Then they weren't just rides. She started planning shopping days where he'd supposedly wait around for her between stores. Once, I even offered to go with her, but she snapped. You just slow me down. Alex doesn't mind waiting. I laughed it off in front of her, but inside, I felt my stomach twist. Around that time, Jane also started changing her style. Different perfume, new dresses, riskier choices. She'd leave the apartment looking like she was going on a date, but when I asked, she'd shrug it off as, just wanting to feel pretty. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. The first undeniable piece of evidence came by accident. Jane left her purse on the counter one night, and her phone buzzed. I don't usually snoop, honestly, I'm the type who avoids looking because I don't want to confirm my fears. But this time, curiosity got the better of me. It was a text. From a number she had saved under Alex, work. Had a great time today. Same time tomorrow. My throat went dry. This wasn't just about rides anymore. When she came out of the shower, I asked her straight up. Jane, are you seeing Alex outside of rides? Her eyes went wide, then narrow. She snatched the phone from my hand like I was a thief. And then the theatrics began. You don't trust me. You're invading my privacy. I can't believe you would spy on me. I tried to explain, to calm her, but she screamed, cried, threw a glass across the kitchen. By the time she was done, somehow I was the one apologizing again. That night, lying awake beside her, I felt the first real seed of rage. That's where I'm at right now. Suspicion, denial, anger, and this gnawing dread in my gut that I already know the truth but I'm too scared to face it head-on. Lisa keeps telling me I need to open my eyes. That Jane is going to hurt me worse if I keep letting this slide. I'm starting to think she's right. But here's the thing, I still love Jane. Or at least, I love the idea of her, the possibility that she could be the one who finally proves my heart wasn't a total waste after all these years. And yet, the cracks are widening. I don't know what's coming next, but I can feel it. Like the quiet before a storm. I'll start at the end, because that's how it burned into my memory. If you read nothing else, this is the moment you need to know. I opened the back door of a yellow cab parked half a block from our building, and there she was, Jane, straddling our driver, Alex. Her hair a mess, her dress hiked up, both of them frozen like animals caught in headlights. That's how I learned my wife was cheating on me. Not from a slip of the tongue. Not from rumors. Not even from a suspicious text. From walking up and yanking open a cab door on a humid Thursday night in New York City. But let me rewind, because I know you're wondering, how did I even get there? How does a man like me, who's seen deals collapse, who's survived corporate betrayals, end up blindsided by something so obvious. In hindsight, the signs were everywhere. Jane's sudden obsession with looking flawless just to run errands. Her new perfume, spicy and bold, completely different from the one she wore with me. The way she'd come home flushed, breathless, acting like she'd run a marathon when all she supposedly did was shopping. But the most damning clue was routine. Same driver. Same hours. Same excuses. I used to believe consistency was a good thing. Turns out, it was just a cover story repeating itself, day after day. On the night it happened, Lisa, my sister, had called me earlier. She was firm, like she always is. "Sam, you're letting her play you. If you want the truth, stop asking her. Watch her. See where she goes." I hated the idea of snooping. Felt beneath me. But at the same time, I couldn't shake the image of Jane laughing in the back seat of that cab with someone who wasn't me. So that night, when Jane told me she was meeting a friend for late dinner, I didn't argue. I kissed her cheek, told her to have fun. Then I followed. I felt ridiculous, like some second-rate detective tailing his wife. But adrenaline kept me moving. I stayed half a block back, keeping to the shadows, watching her heels click against the pavement until she slid into the familiar yellow cab. It wasn't a dinner with friends. She didn't head uptown to the restaurant she named. No, Alex drove her in circles, then parked under a dim streetlight near the park. At first, nothing happened. I thought maybe I was crazy. Maybe they really were just friends. But then I saw it. Her silhouette leaning across the seat. His arms sliding around her. Her head tilting back. That was it. Something snapped. I marched straight to the cab, fists clenched, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear. Without thinking, I yanked the rear door open. And there they were. My wife and her driver. The shock on Jane's face wasn't guilt, it was rage, like I was the intruder. "What the hell are you doing here?" she shrieked, scrambling to fix her dress. Alex looked like he wanted to melt into the seat. Couldn't even look me in the eye. I didn't yell. Didn't hit anyone. I just stood there, staring at the woman I thought I loved, realizing in real time that she'd never really been mine. We walked back to the apartment in silence, Jane stomping ahead, muttering curses under her breath. Once inside, the explosion came. "You were spying on me. Do you have any idea how insane that is?" She screamed. I laughed, bitter and hollow. "Spying? Jane, I found you in the back of a taxi with another man. That's not spying. That's catching you red-handed." She crossed her arms, eyes wild. It wasn't what it looked like. "We were just talking, Talking?" I cut her off. "With your dress up around your waist?" She switched tactics instantly, tears welling in her eyes. "You don't understand me. You've never understood me." Alex listens. He cares. You're just old and controlling. That stung. More than I expected. The next hour was a circus of lies. Jane denied, twisted, rewrote reality as she always did. It only happened once. I'd already seen the text suggesting otherwise. "He means nothing to me." Her trembling hand said otherwise. "You drove me to this with your jealousy." As if my suspicion caused the betrayal, not the other way around. Every excuse was a knife. And yet, somewhere deep down, I still wanted to believe one of them. Anything to make it hurt less. I didn't sleep that night. Sat in the living room staring at the city lights, replaying the moment I opened that cab door. The image etched itself into me, her eyes wide, his hands frozen, the cheap fabric of the cab seat against her skin. Shock gave way to anger. Anger collapsed into sorrow. And finally, somewhere around dawn, came acceptance. I realized I'd been chasing ghosts, trying to find in Jane the same kind of love my first wife gave me decades ago. Real love. Selfless love. But Jane was never going to be that person. She wasn't my salvation. She was my punishment. By morning, I knew what I had to do. Divorce. No more excuses, no more apologies. When I told Jane, she didn't cry. She laughed. This sharp, bitter laugh. Fine. Go ahead. But you'll come crawling back. You always do. Not this time. Later that day, I sat with Lisa and told her everything. Every detail, every excuse Jane spewed. Lisa didn't gloat, didn't say, "I told you so." She just squeezed my hand and said, "Then let's make sure she doesn't walk away clean." That's when the idea of revenge started to take root. Not petty revenge. Not shouting in the street. But quiet, calculated consequences. It's strange, once the decision was made, I felt lighter. Not happy, not yet, but free. Jane is still in the apartment for now, stomping around like a caged animal, alternating between hysterical sobs and venomous insults. She calls me weak, pathetic, useless. But her words don't land anymore. Because I saw the truth with my own eyes. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. If you've been following my story, you already know the moment I opened the cab door and found Jane with Alex was the night everything shattered. What I didn't know then was that it was also the night her life, not mine, started sliding downhill. Here's how it all unfolded. The morning after catching Jane, I walked into our bedroom with one sentence ready. I'm filing for divorce. She didn't cry. Didn't beg. She smirked, like a teenager who thinks she's smarter than everyone in the room. You can't leave me, she said. Do you know what people will say? Do you know what I will say? That was the first crack in her armor. She thought she had leverage. Thought she could spin it. What she didn't realize is that I'd spent my entire career dealing with liars. Only difference was, in business, they wore suits instead of dresses. Here's something Jane didn't bank on, a prenup. After 3 divorces, I wasn't walking into marriage number 4 without paperwork. When Jane first balked at signing, I'd told her, if you're with me for love, not money, this shouldn't matter. She signed. Which meant now, with divorce on the table, her legal share was small. Comfortable, yes, but nothing compared to the luxury she'd been living in. When I reminded her of the prenup, she went pale. Then the tantrum came. You tricked me. You knew this would happen. No, I said calmly. I knew myself. I knew people. And I prepared. Jane thought she could outmaneuver me legally. She hired a flashy lawyer, strutted into court in designer heels, and tried to paint me as a cruel, controlling husband who drove her to Alex. Her problem? Receipts. Texts. Witnesses. A certain cab company's GPS records showing exactly how many late-night detours she'd taken with her driver. Her lawyer's arguments collapsed under evidence. The judge wasn't impressed with theatrics. For the first time, I saw Jane lose control in public. Her voice cracked, her face flushed, and when the gavel came down, she wasn't walking out with the payday she expected. Jane thrived on her reputation. The glamorous younger wife of a wealthy New Yorker, it gave her status, invitations, envy. But gossip in this city moves faster than light. It started with whispers. Then the story of the cab driver affair spread. By the time divorce papers were signed, Jane was being uninvited from events she once lived for. Old modeling friends ghosted her. Photographers stopped calling. The same people who clapped when she walked into a room now looked away. Nobody wants to be associated with a scandal that makes headlines in the ugliest way. She lost not just money, but her audience. Lisa, my sister, was the quiet strategist behind it all. She wasn't vengeful, but she was sharp. Don't lash out, she told me. Don't scream. Don't give her ammunition. Just let her unravel. People like Jane, they do the damage themselves, all you have to do is stand back and let it happen. So I did. I stayed calm. Professional. Every time Jane lashed out, I documented it. Every time she lied, I had the truth ready. It wasn't revenge in the dramatic sense. No grand scheme, no tabloid exposé. Just, reality catching up with her. I still remember the last time she stormed into the apartment, before the divorce finalized. She was hysterical, pacing, ranting. Everyone's turned on me. My friends, my work, everything. You've ruined me, Sam. I looked at her and felt nothing. Not anger, not love. Just emptiness. I didn't ruin you, I said softly. You did. She froze, like the words had finally pierced through the fog. For a moment, I saw the scared, insecure girl underneath the glamorous mask. But it was too late. Funny thing, I thought catching Jane would destroy me. I thought I'd spiral into bitterness, regret, maybe even give up. Instead, I started to feel lighter. I walked through the city without wondering where she was. Ate meals without waiting for her texts. Slept soundly for the first time in years. It's amazing how much space a toxic person can take up in your mind. And how freeing it is when they're gone. Jane thought she could cheat and still win. She thought I was too weak, too desperate for love to ever leave. But here's the truth I've learned, the moment you stop chasing people who don't respect you, your whole world opens up. I didn't destroy Jane. She destroyed herself. The only thing I did was stop protecting her from the consequences. I always thought revenge meant fire and fury. Raised voices, slammed doors, maybe some dramatic gesture straight out of a movie. But that's not how it works in real life, at least, not for me. For me, revenge turned out to be silence. Patience. Letting time do the work while I sat back and rebuilt my life brick by brick. Meanwhile, Jane unraveled. The day the judge stamped the papers, I walked out of the courthouse feeling like I'd shed 100 pounds. Not physically, though God knows my back had been aching for years, but emotionally. Jane stormed out a few minutes later, heels clacking, sunglasses hiding her eyes even though it was raining. She didn't look at me. Didn't have to. The way she shoved past people told the whole story, she'd lost. And in her mind, losing wasn't just about money. It was about power. About image. About being the woman who could still bend older men like me to her will. That illusion was gone. The prenup limited what Jane walked away with. She got a settlement, yes, but not the bottomless credit card lifestyle she'd grown addicted to. At first, she tried to keep up appearances. Shopping sprees, Instagram posts, expensive dinners. But I knew the math didn't add up. Then the cracks started showing. A friend mentioned she'd been borrowing money. A doorman whispered that her tips had dried up. I overheard her screaming at her bank on the phone once, demanding overdraft fees be reversed. It wasn't immediate collapse. It was slow, humiliating erosion. If money was the first domino, reputation was the second. Manhattan's social scene is a shark tank. People smell weakness faster than blood. The moment word spread about the taxi driver affair, Jane stopped being the glamorous younger wife and started being a punchline. She wasn't invited to the charity galas anymore. Her modeling acquaintances, the ones who used to flatter her endlessly, moved on to fresher faces. Even her so-called girlfriends, the women she used to sip champagne with on rooftops, stopped answering her calls. I didn't lift a finger. I didn't need to. She exiled herself with her own choices. Here's where it gets interesting. A few weeks after the divorce, Jane started calling me again. First, it was accidental, a voicemail of nothing but silence, or a text that said, "Sorry, wrong number." Then it became bolder. Can we talk? I made a mistake. One night, after a couple glasses of whiskey, I answered. Her voice was shaky, not the sharp, commanding Jane I'd married. Sam, I don't know what I was thinking. Alex meant nothing. You're the only one who ever really cared. For a moment, my chest tightened. The old me, the man who always wanted to fix her, save her, nearly spoke up. Nearly offered her a way back. But then I remembered the cab door swinging open. The look on her face when she realized she'd been caught. No, Jane, I said. You cared about money, about status. Not me. And you lost both. I hung up. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel weak for saying no. Lisa has this sly smile she gets when she knows she was right but doesn't want to gloat. When I told her about Jane's calls, she just shook her head. She'll keep trying, Lisa said. Not because she loves you. Because she needs you. And there's a difference. That stuck with me. The difference between love and need. Love is freely given. Need is desperation disguised as affection. For decades, I confused the two. Not anymore. It's funny how little things feel enormous after a toxic storm. I started cooking for myself again, simple meals, nothing fancy. Eggs in the morning, pasta at night. For once, I wasn't worried about whether Jane would wrinkle her nose and complain about the smell. I reconnected with old friends I'd neglected while trying to keep Jane happy. They welcomed me back without judgment, like I'd just been away on a long trip. I even dusted off my piano, something I hadn't touched in years. My fingers were stiff, but the music still lived in them. Every small victory felt like reclaiming a piece of myself Jane had stolen. The last I heard, Jane moved into a smaller apartment uptown. Gone were the doormen, the penthouse views, the designer closets. Now it was cramped hallways and neighbors who didn't care who she used to be. She tried to reinvent herself online, posting old modeling shots, writing captions about new beginnings. But the comments were brutal. People remembered. Screenshots of her affair story circulated, paired with cruel jokes. Reputation, once lost, doesn't come back. Not in this city. Oh, and Alex. The infamous taxi driver. Gone. As quickly as he appeared. A friend of mine said he'd seen Alex back driving late-night shifts, no Jane in sight. Maybe he realized she was more trouble than she was worth. Maybe she dropped him the moment the fantasy collapsed. Either way, poetic justice. She risked everything for him, and in the end, he wasn't even there to catch her when she fell. I used to think I needed someone beside me to feel complete. That's why I kept marrying, kept chasing, kept hoping. But sitting alone in my apartment now, piano music drifting through the air, I feel something I haven't felt in years, peace. Jane thought she could break me. But all she broke was herself. And me? I'm still standing. I always thought Jane would slip into obscurity after the divorce, fade into the background like so many once glamorous faces in this city. But that wasn't her style. Jane never went quietly. She burned. Loud. Messy. Public. And in the end, the flames she lit only consumed her. A month after the divorce, I got an invitation to a charity gala. Normally, I avoid those events, too much small talk, too many handshakes, but Lisa convinced me to go. People need to see you standing tall, she said. Don't hide just because Jane's gone. So I went. Suit pressed, tie knotted, glass of champagne in hand. For the first time in a long time, I felt comfortable in my own skin. Then Jane walked in. She wasn't on the guest list. I later learned she begged someone for a last-minute ticket. She wore a glittering silver dress, the kind you choose when you're desperate to be seen. And at first, she was. Heads turned. Cameras flashed. For a moment, she had them. Until she saw me. She stormed across the room, ignoring the whispers, and hissed, "You're pathetic, Sam. Parading yourself around like you won." I stayed calm. "Jane, this isn't the place." She raised her voice, loud enough for half the room to hear. "You think you're better than me? Everyone here knows you're a bitter old man who couldn't keep a woman happy." The room froze. People stared. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just turned, nodded politely to a couple beside me, and walked away. That silence. That refusal to engage. It did more damage to Jane's image than anything I could have said. Within hours, the whispers had shifted. Not about me, about her. New York society thrives on gossip. By the next morning, every corner of Jane's old circle was buzzing. "Did you see her at the gala? She caused a scene. She's unraveling. Screaming at her ex in front of everyone. Desperate. Absolutely desperate." The story spread faster than any headline. Once people smell humiliation, they feast on it. Jane became the cautionary tale. Not the glamorous younger wife anymore, now she was the woman who lost it all to a cab driver and couldn't let go. I almost felt sorry for her when she agreed to a tabloid interview. Almost. She thought it would set the record straight. She expected sympathy, maybe even a chance to rebuild her image. Instead, she gave the reporter a rambling monologue about betrayal, control, and how New York society is cruel. The article painted her as unstable. Quotes like, "Sam never understood my spirit. I deserved better than a dusty old man clinging to his money." People laughed. Screenshots flew around social media with captions like, "Dusty old man still doing better than you, Jane." It was brutal. And once it was out there, she couldn't take it back. A week later, I went to dinner with a couple of old business partners. Halfway through the meal, Jane appeared at the same restaurant. Coincidence? Maybe. But knowing her, I suspect she came there to make a scene. Sure enough, halfway through her meal, she stood up and marched over to our table. "You think you can just erase me, Sam," she spat. "I made you interesting again. Without me, you're just a boring old man with nothing to offer." The room fell silent. Forks paused midair. I looked at her, really looked at her. Hair slightly unkempt, makeup smudged, eyes wide with desperation. She wasn't the dazzling woman I married. She was a storm collapsing in on itself. So I said, calmly, "Jane, you're embarrassing yourself." Then I turned back to my meal. The applause that followed wasn't loud, just a smattering of clinks and murmurs, but it was enough. She stormed out, face red, while the whispers trailed behind her like smoke. When I told Lisa about it, she just shook her head. "She's not fighting you anymore," Lisa said. "She's fighting the ghost of who she thought she was. And she's losing." I think that's what stung Jane most. Not me, not Alex, not even the money. It was the realization that her image, the glamorous, untouchable version of herself, was dead. And the whole city knew it. Funny thing, while Jane burned, my own reputation quietly repaired itself. People who hadn't spoken to me in years started reaching out. Old friends, business contacts, even acquaintances I barely remembered. They wanted lunches, meetings, catch-ups. Not because I was suddenly more interesting, but because I'd done something rare in this city. I'd stayed quiet, dignified, while chaos swirled around me. And in a world addicted to scandal, dignity is rare. Valuable. The last time Jane reached out was another voicemail. Her voice was slurred, maybe drunk. "Sam, we could have had it all. You and me. Please, don't let me disappear." I listened once, deleted it, and poured myself a glass of wine. Because the truth is, she already had disappeared. The moment she chose Alex over us, the moment she screamed in that gala, the moment she humiliated herself in that restaurant, Jane wrote her own ending. All I did was step aside and let the curtain fall. Revenge wasn't slamming doors or shouting her down. It wasn't dragging her name through the mud. It was patience. It was calm. It was letting her destroy her own reputation while I lived quietly, steadily, without her. And in the end, living well wasn't just the best revenge. It was the only revenge worth having. If you followed my story, you know it started with betrayal, anger, and shame. I thought Jane would be the last chapter of my life. I thought I'd die bitter, a man who had everything but somehow managed to lose the only thing that mattered. But life surprised me. It gave me something I didn't deserve, a second chance. Not at youth, not at money, not even at reputation, but at love. Real love. The kind I once betrayed and thought I'd never feel again. Her name is Clara. Clara wasn't a model, or a socialite, or someone from my old business world. She was a librarian. A woman with warm brown eyes, a quiet laugh, and a patience that made me feel seen. We met at a community book event my sister Lisa dragged me to. I almost didn't go, I thought it would be boring. But Clara sat beside me, asked if I'd ever read Steinbeck, and for the first time in years, I wanted to talk about more than numbers and losses. Conversations turned into coffee. Coffee turned into dinners. Dinners turned into long walks in the park where she never once asked about my money, my past, or my mistakes. She only asked about me. And I told her. All of it. The affairs, the regrets, Jane. I laid my sins bare. She didn't flinch. She just said, softly. Maybe you finally know what love is, Sam. That means you're ready for it now. For a year, Clara and I built something beautiful. Not glamorous, not perfect, but steady, honest, real. Then came the diagnosis. Cancer. Aggressive. Too late to treat. When the doctor left the room, I sat there in silence. I thought Clara would leave, why wouldn't she? Who chooses to stay with a dying man? But she reached for my hand, squeezed it, and whispered. You're not doing this alone. And she meant it. Every day after that, she proved it. Now, as I write this, I'm in a hospice bed. The city hums outside my window, but my world is smaller, pills, nurses, quiet hours that stretch like years. And Clara. Always Clara. She comes every day, rain or shine. Reads to me. Brings me soup. Tells me about the world outside so I don't forget it still spins. Sometimes she cries when she thinks I'm asleep. Sometimes I wake up to find her holding my hand, whispering promises to a man who might not wake up again. One night, she leaned close and said. I'll never stop loving you, Sam. Even when you're gone, I'll belong to you. I felt tears on my cheeks. The same man who betrayed his first wife, who wasted years chasing empty women, was somehow being loved this fiercely, this faithfully, at the very end. I don't have much time. I know that now. So I asked Clara to marry me. Her hands flew to her mouth. Sam, you don't have to. But I cut her off. I want to. I need to. I want the world to know you're my wife, not just my angel. She cried. I cried. The nurses cried. And in a small room with pale green walls, I slipped a simple ring onto her finger and whispered my vow. I'll wait for you. But not too soon. Live to 100, baby. Live this life for both of us. And when your time comes, 50 years from now, I'll be right there waiting. I used to think my legacy would be the companies I built, the money I made, or the scandals I survived. But that's not what matters. What matters is that, at the very end, I was loved for who I am, not what I had. That a woman sat beside my bed every day, promising to carry my heart with her until hers stopped beating too. That's what I leave behind. Not bitterness. Not shame. Love. Pure, stubborn love. So if you're reading this, wondering whether love is still possible after you've ruined things, after you've aged, after you've given up hope, listen to me. It is. And it's worth more than every mistake you've ever made.
It's been 2 years since Sam passed. Some mornings I still reach for his hand in the dark. The absence feels sharper than any blade. But then I hear his voice in my memory, low and steady. Live to 100, baby. Live this life for both of us. And I get up. I walk. I read. I laugh with friends. I go to the farmer's market on Saturdays because Sam loved the smell of peaches in summer. I've even taken a trip to California just like he once told me I should. Every Sunday I visit him. His stone is simple, just his name, the dates, and the words he wanted. Loved and waited. I sit there with flowers and talk to him about my week. Sometimes I tell him secrets. Sometimes I just sit in silence and let the wind answer for him. People ask me if I'll ever remarry. I smile and shake my head. They don't understand. Sam and I made a promise. He's waiting for me. But not yet. Not for a long time. I'll keep my word. I'll live this life in full. And when I turn 100, when I've carried his love through decades of sunsets and winters, then and only then will I let myself go back to him. Until then I am his. And he is mine. Forever.